Well, we've gotten up to 1800 now then. It turned out that the Alien and Sedition Acts sort of became, they became irrelevant because we did not go to war with France, and so they just expired, so they became non-issues. But the question of whether Congress has that power or not is still there. We don't have an answer as to whether Congress can declare an act of Congress unconstitutional or not. We don't have an answer as to whether Congress can charter a bank. It did, but there are still people who say no, it can't. So we still don't have this question resolved of whether we're a single state or a single nation or a federation of states. In the election of 1800, the Republicans won. They had been the majority party, but now they became the minority party. In the election of 1800, Jefferson was elected in a bitter political battle against he's the Republican candidate. The Federalists nominated John Adams. The campaign of 1800 was a very ugly one, but when it was over, Jefferson won. The Federalists became the minority party. They never regained power. They had lost touch with the common people, and they just kept going downhill, starting in 1800, and from thereafter, without getting into the details, they just became weaker and weaker. They never won another presidential election. They never again had a majority in Congress. And we'll eventually get to the point in a day or two when they went away. So now Jefferson, the advocate of states' rights and limited federal government, he became the president. And he inherited a foreign policy situation which had been fixed by the Federalists, by Washington and Adams before him, and he inherits a very sound position for our foreign policy. And didn't last very long. England and France, after going to a big war, had made a treaty in 1801. And so there's peace between them. But in that same year, in France, a guy named Napoleon regained power. And Napoleon decided that he wanted to re-establish the power of France. France had lost the 7 Years' War. They'd been torn apart by a revolution and by internal fighting, civil war within France. Napoleon is saying, we're going to put a stop to all of this, and we're going to reestablish France as the great power in the world that it had been back before the 7 Years' War and before things started to go downhill for France. His first objective was to reacquire some of the territory that France had lost as a result of the 7 Years' War. If you remember, at the end of the 7 Years' War, England and France had signed a treaty, the Treaty of Paris of 1763, by which France gave up all of its empire on the continent of North America. And that included much of Canada. It included the whole west area from the Appalachians clear out to the Pacific, the whole Mississippi Valley with the Ohio Valley and the Missouri Valley. All of that had been the French Empire, and they lost it all. If you remember, everything east of the Mississippi went to England. Everything west of the Mississippi went to Spain. Now the part that was east of the Mississippi was England's, and then they lost it in the Revolutionary War. They lost it to us. Well, they didn't really lose it. They gave it to us at the end of the war. So we've acquired all that territory east of the Mississippi, between the Mississippi and the Appalachian Mountains, between the Great Lakes and the Gulf of Mexico. All of that is now American territory. But everything on the west of the Mississippi is all now under Spain. And that included a key place that we've talked about a lot. That included New Orleans, which is actually east of the river. It's on the east bank of the river, but technically there's that little tiny section down there, just the last 100 miles or so of the Mississippi River, where New Orleans sits, that's part of the area west of the Mississippi that's under Spanish rule. So Spain has controlled, as you know, since 1763, Spain has controlled New Orleans. And that's why the Pinckney's Treaty of 1795 was so important. By Pinckney's Treaty, Spain allowed the United States to use New Orleans. So we care a lot about New Orleans. Well, as part of his plan to sort of reestablish the French Empire, Napoleon, without getting into the details of how he did this, he basically kind of beat up on Spain. He went to Spain and kind of put the king in a closet and said, do what I tell you. And he got Spain to return all of that area west of the Mississippi to France. It had it before the 7 Years' War. Now it's got it back. And that included New Orleans. Well, in the United States, we're really concerned about that. And we don't exactly know what's going on. The agreement by which Spain had returned this area west of the Mississippi, I'm going to call it the Louisiana Territory, just for want of a better name, because it's Louisiana down at the very end, and we'll just call the whole area Louisiana. All of Louisiana is back in French control. We don't know that for sure, but we care a lot about this. Jefferson is very concerned about the importance of New Orleans to the United States. Our whole western development for the area that we control east of the Mississippi, but it depends on access to New Orleans. So it's of great concern to him. Rumors start circulating that this transfer is taken back. It has not been confirmed officially, but in diplomatic circles, there's all sorts of gossip that Spain had given in to pressure from Napoleon and given him what he wanted in returning Louisiana to him. So we want to deal with that. We want to find out if we can get the continued use of New Orleans. So Jefferson sent some ambassadors to go to Paris and negotiate with representatives of Napoleon, not himself, but people that he'll appoint as his ambassadors, and find out what the hell is going on with New Orleans, and find out if France intends to honor Pinckney's Treaty, which is with Spain, but there's no rule that you can't just honor it anyway. Do they intend to honor it and let us continue to use New Orleans, which has been so important to us? We've only been there for a couple of years, but we've had a lot of increase in our trade down the Mississippi. The number of American rafts or barges floating down the river carrying agricultural products is very great. Every year it's been expanding. We're using New Orleans more and more. We really rely on it. We're starting to settle that area west of the Appalachians, and that's really important to us. But it all depends on being able to continue to use New Orleans. So we want to make sure we can do it. Well, to make a long story short, there is some negotiation there, and at first Napoleon didn't want to sell, or he didn't want to let us use New Orleans. And so we kept arguing with him and trying to convince him that he should, and da-da-da-da, and then we decided to offer him some money, and at first it wasn't enough, and da-da-da, it goes around and around, it's a long story. But after some months of negotiation, in early 1803, like about sometime in March of 1803, Napoleon said, okay, I'll let you use New Orleans, but you got to buy New Orleans. You got to buy that area that's east of the river, that little tiny area where New Orleans is located, just at the very sort of the very bottom of the whole Eastern Territory, which is still it's now in French ownership. And there's just a little chunk of land there. There's just a little tiny square around that includes the city of New Orleans and the area around it, most of which is a big swamp. But you can have it, but you got to buy all the rest of Louisiana as well. Huh? I mean, we're trying to get to use, all we care about is New Orleans. And if they want to sell it to us, if they'll only let us use it, if we buy it, okay, we'll buy it. But we're only talking about that little tiny piece of land. And now they offer to sell us twice as much land, or as much land as the whole United States. We can double our area by accepting this offer. And, you know, you just look at the numbers, look at it as a business investment. I forget the numbers, but, or I sort of have the numbers in my head, but the numbers don't matter. But it turns out that the land we're going to acquire is going to be about 3.5 cents an acre. And at that time, the United States is selling land in the West. We're selling it to farmers in the West for like $1.50. The price fluctuated, but let's just say at times it was as low as $1. We're going to get that land. We're selling it at $1 an acre. We can buy it at 3 cents an acre. Is that a good deal? Well, yeah. If you can buy something for 3 cents and sell it for $1, good deal. Go do it. So, yeah, it's a tremendous opportunity. It'll give us guaranteed access to New Orleans. That'll take care of that. That's what we care about. But it's going to give us all that additional land that we can settle. All of that land, all the way out to, and it includes Montana. So, you know, how can, if you can get Montana, then you can't get any better than that. So, yeah, it's a good deal. And so our agents in Paris who've negotiated this, I mean, they're just astounded at what a great deal this is. They send a message to Jefferson and say, hey, you'll never believe what a good deal we got. We're going to get to buy this whole area that Napoleon has agreed to sell us. And look at how much land we're going to get, and price is great and everything like that. And Jefferson wrote back and he said, yeah, it's a great deal. But there's a problem. There's a problem. And if you remember today's earlier discussion, you might be able to guess what the problem is. Does the Constitution authorize Congress to double the size of the country, to add additional territory at that kind of volume? Yeah, maybe we could buy a little piece. If you just wanted to buy a little chunk of land around New Orleans, maybe that's okay. But to buy a vast territory, does the Constitution authorize that in strict limited terms? Is there, given strict construction, given the idea of limited federal power, given all of the things that Jefferson is on the books for, his whole idea about the states as sovereign, that we're a federation of states, and that the federal government can only do a few things that are provided for in the Constitution. This is unconstitutional. Can't do it. Congress doesn't have the power to purchase that land. But there's an out, and maybe you can think about it. There's an option. We have an escape route here. An escape route is kind of simple. We just have to amend the Constitution to authorize this. So Jefferson sends a message back to our negotiators in Paris and says, okay, look, yeah, I think it's a great deal. I agree with you. It's a great deal. We should do it. Tell Napoleon we'll go with this, and we're happy. We're going to do this. But first of all, we've got to amend our Constitution. Well, I don't want to get into the whole process of amending the Constitution. That's a long story. But let's just, to make the long story short, it can take a long time. It can be done quickly. Some of our amendments that we have to the Constitution have been ratified very quickly. The first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights, was amended within a couple of years. Other amendments have taken many years, decades, to be ratified. So it takes it can take a long time, and nobody knows how long it's going to take. So our envoys to Paris, they send back a message, Tom, we got to move on this. We're dealing here with Napoleon, the single most crazy man in the world, and he's made this offer, and it's just kind of a fluke offer off the top of his head. Who knows why? Um, but we can't wait on it. We can't screw around on this. If we say, oh, okay, we'll get to you, we'll get back to you as soon as we amend the Constitution, he'll say, well, forget it, I'll sell it to somebody else. Or I'll keep it myself. Maybe I don't want to sell it. So they told Jefferson, we got to go ahead. And Jefferson, remember, is a guy whose whole principle has been the need to have a limited government for a republic. That means in our case, that means we need a limited federal government. We need state governments. We're a federation of states. Each state has a sovereign government. The federal government can only do the things that are authorized by the Constitution. The Constitution does not authorize this. So, yeah, let's go ahead and do it. What? He just says, you know, this is against all of his principles. This is against everything that he stands for. And he says, yeah, go ahead and do it. I know, we're shaving the Constitution here, but let's do it because we need it. And so sometimes I ask students, you know, to think about this and maybe have a debate about whether you approve of what Jefferson did. I mean, it's like he's sort of sacrificing his whole constitutional position, his whole stand on strict construction, his whole position in the Kentucky resolves, which he had just written a couple of years before, arguing that there's a limited federal government. You know, now he's saying, okay, well, the federal government can do whatever it wants. People sometimes don't approve of that. But let me just point out to you, in defense of Jefferson, you know, if he had said no to that, we would have been hurt immeasurably. And what's the purpose of having a government? Is it to do what's best for the country? Or is it to follow somebody's principles of states' rights, strict construction? Now, I would argue, and I can see you could argue with me, and you'd be on very strong grounds if you disagreed with me. You'd have a legitimate point. I mean, he's sacrificed his principles in order to accomplish some particular objective. But what's the point of principles if you only follow them when you want to? So you could say that, but I would argue that in the long run, in the final analysis, what really matters is this going to benefit the country? And how do we decide that? Who decides what's going to benefit them? It's the people. And Jefferson said when he approved this, when he sent the final message back and he said, go ahead, he sort of knew that he was on thin ice, but he said, look, there's an election coming up in a couple of years. This is 1803. There's going to be an election next year. If the people don't approve of what I've done, they can act, they can vote me out. He said, but I know they won't, because they're going to agree with me that it's a great deal. And what it really does is it gives us a lot of land that we don't need yet. I mean, we've barely settled the area east of the Mississippi. We've just started settling that. We're not ready to settle west of the Mississippi, but the time will come when we do, and we'll have a lot of land, which means that people can become landowners, they can vote, and we can preserve a republic. We'll have enough land, Jefferson said, to last 50 generations, 1,000 years, as a republic. So it's a good deal. So we went ahead and did it.